Hello everyone and welcome to this PopcornFX version 2.14 live stream. And so today we're going to try to show you some of the new features we've implemented in this version that is released today. So here is the different topics we're gonna see today. So first we're gonna see the skeleton mesh particles, which is a new feature which allows you to create effects and render particle as skeletal meshes in PopcornFX, so potentially create crowd effects. We're going to see also some other rendering improvements that we added in this version, and we're going to talk about some runtime improvements also, and UX and template improvements. And finally, we're going to finish by showing you three packs and FX tutorials. Three new packs and some new effects tutorial that we've added in the existing contents of the marketplace PopcornFX. So I'm gonna start by showing you. So I'm gonna start by talking about the skeletal skeletal mesh animations to render particle in PopcornFX. So here you have a video that we've made that shows kind of a hardcore example with many instances of skeletal meshes in the stadium, which interact with the gameplay dynamically. So to show you that, I'm gonna jump in the PopcornFX editor directly. And I'm gonna show you, so this is a basic example of the crowd effects. So the way it works is basically we import some animations, some FBX files containing animations in PopcornFX, and we can bake those animations in a texture, in a lookup texture, which allows us to sample this texture and not recompute the whole Boone hierarchy for each instance. So we can have many instances with pretty good performances here. So you can see this is the renderer that is used for those meshes. And you can see that it uses this texture, which is a lookup texture that contains the bone animation data. So to export those textures from the PopcornFX editor, it's pretty easy. You can just open your mesh directly in the PopcornFX content browser. So here you get the mannequin mesh. So you open the mesh with the typos, for example. We also have this new panel here, right next to the bake settings panel in the mesh viewer, which shows all the bones from this mesh. And if we actually take a mesh, so if I actually display the skeleton, you can see that the selected bone should be highlighted here when I select it. Yes. Yeah, it's not obvious because there are many very small bones in the hands. And so we're going to export those bones in a texture containing the animation data. So from this mesh that contains the typos, we can export a texture. Let's call it animations test, for example. And I can easily import a few animations. So here I'll import three animations: the idle animation, the running animation, and the standard walk animation. And there you should have a panel to export those animations as a texture here. So here we get the three animations contained in the texture. You can choose like a sample count, which will be the number of samples that we will take in the animation. So for example, let's say 64 here, and you can export this.
So this will be the width of the animation texture.
Yeah, so the number of sample will be the width of the animation texture, and the age of the animation will be basically the number of bones multiplied by the number of animations you want to export. Multiplied by 2 because we export like a rotation and a position per bone. And so once you exported this texture, you have this small pop-up that appears that says that the renderer has been copied to your clipboard. And this allows you to just create a new effect very quickly here. So I'll just create an empty effect, animation test. I'll just create an empty layer. I'll put an infinite life on this layer so that it lasts as long as the effect is running. And I can just, here I've just done Control V, and I've pasted the mesh renderer. And so you should be able to see the mesh renderer here. So let's light it so that you can see more details. And you have this animation cursor pin here that you can put a value into, and it basically plays the animation. So here it's a bit rough because I've exported 8-bit per channel texture, but you can export 16-bit per channel texture and have very smooth animations. And you can change which animation you want to play here. So yes, this is very powerful because we've added 2 additional features to this technique, which are being able to interpolate between the frames of the animations that you've sampled. So here you get an example. If I slow down the time here, you can see that the mesh on the left is very laggy because we only have a certain amount of samples in the animations, whereas the mesh on the right is animated very smoothly, and that's just because we've enabled this skeletal animation interpolate, which interpolates between the different frames of the animation. And we also have a feature to interpolate between the different animations. So this will not do clean interpolations. It will have some scaling, and you might have weird animations between weird transitions between animations, but that's because we don't recompute the whole bone hierarchy. So it's because of the optimizations that the transition can seem weird, but it's still a lot better than just jumping from one animation to another. So here you just saw that the mesh on the left doesn't have any transition between the animations, so it's very rough and it goes from one animation to the other in just one frame. So in addition to that, we've also added a feature to be able to have atlases, just simple texture atlases on meshes, so that you can have a mesh renderer with multiple submeshes or with multiple submeshes inside of it, and you can apply different textures to each one of those submeshes. So in this case, it just works as a regular atlas for billboard particles. So here you have the atlas feature, which is enabled, and you can see that in the diffuse map, for example, you get the 4 diffuse texture for each submesh, which are packed in the same texture. So you just can give a texture ID corresponding to the appropriate mesh ID here, and you have the correct texture on the meshes. And the last thing that we've added regarding mesh renderers is being able to import LODs from meshes directly from the FBX. So to do that, we have 2 ways of importing those LODs, either depending on the hierarchy of the FBX file. So that's basically how, for example, Unreal, I think, automatically import LODs from FBX files. And you can also just append underscore LOD0 underscore LOD1 to the meshes that you want in each LOD. So that's the screenshot here on the right. And that's more of a Unity style way to import LODs, as they handle this kind of semantics in their mesh names. So yeah, I have a quick example here. It's very basic. But if I go in the meshes, yeah, so this is a mesh with many LODs. For now, they are not imported because in the back settings, import level of detail is set to no LODs. But here you can choose which kind of import type you want. So in this case, it's the hierarchy one. So if I check hierarchy-based LOD and then re-import the mesh, here you will have all the LODs in this combo box here, and you can see the submeshes in each LOD here. And so yeah, same thing with the name-based LOD. So basically, to produce the same asset in the end. It's just two different ways of handling this. And then directly in the node graph, so should have an example in the tutorial pack here. Yeah, so then directly in the node graph, you can specify LOD level. And so it's basically another level of hierarchy in the mesh, PopcornFX meshes, with the mesh IDs. But it pretty much works like the mesh IDs, but you can have multiple mesh IDs per LOD level. So that's the main interest. So for example, if I go back to the crowd effects here you have 4 LOD levels. So if I pause the simulation here and I go far away, far from the camera, you can see that the meshes are really simplified here. And on each LOD level, we have all the variations of the different type of characters we have in the crowd here.
So the character selection uses mesh ID, and the LOD selection uses the LOD pin.
Yep,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, so you can see that, for example, here as a render input, you will have mesh ID, which is plugged, which corresponds to which character you want to draw. Is it a woman or like the bald man here, for example? And the LOD, which will depend on the distance of the camera or like the screen size of the mesh. Yep. So I think that's it for the skeletal mesh particles. And we've also done some other miscellaneous rendering improvements in the editor. So the first one is we can now have opaque particles colliding with the depth buffer. So basically, when you are using GPU simulation in PopcornFX and you want to have some collisions with the environments, we had this option since 2.12 where you could select to sample the depth buffer, and so it fakes the particle collisions using this the depth buffer of your scene. And the main issue was that as if you select opaque particles, those opaque particles themselves write in the depth buffer, and so you end up with self collisions on your particles, which you don't want. So we just added a render pass where we can render the opaque particles separately from the scene, and we can now have opaque particles colliding with the scene with the GPU simulation. And the other very small feature that we've added, so I'm not sure if we have, no, I don't think we have a cube map here in any of those effects, but basically we've added, I'll show you anyway. Basically we've added in the background scene properties here. If you select, so here I don't have any cube map, so I've just select a random texture and it kind of looks weird, but you now have this environment map rotation, which allows you to rotate the environment map. So it's a small thing that was asked by some artists. So yeah, not so much, but it can be pretty useful in some cases. Yep. And I'll let Julien talk about the runtime improvements now.
Except the GPU sim, you do the GPU sim.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So basically, yes, there were improvements in the GPU sim. Regarding the parallelism of the GPU sim, so now the tasks are better split up and can be executed with better parallelism. So here you can see the CPU tasks that are actually filling the compute buffers, the command buffers for the GPU. And you could see that before it was all serialized on one thread, and it's no way better. And like the GPU commands are recorded in parallel on multiple threads. And yeah, I'll let Julien talk about the special layers and the new queries for the special layers.
And just as a small comment, the scales of those two screenshots is not the same. So the one on the right with the improvements is much more zoomed in than the one on the left, and you can see there are like 4 blocks on the one on the left, and each one of these is basically pretty much the size of one of the big ones here, so it's quite a nice improvement. So regarding the special layers, we added a pretty small and niche feature, but still quite good if you want to fine-tune the optimizations of your special layers. So up till now, the queries to the special layers had the form of a position and a radius. So here in this effect, you can see that these incoming particles insert themselves and their color inside the special layer of this effect, which I can show here. And these small particles query with their position and a fixed radius this color property. And this is why you see those color circles, which basically represent the radius of the query. And here what I've just displayed is the debug visualization of the internal structure of the hash grid that we use for the special layers. So this is based on a bunch of cells in space where the data is stored. And so the new type of queries are direct access to the cells. Instead of providing a position and a radius, you simply provide the cell coordinates. So here, if I select this special query node and switch the query type from closest to, for example, get from cell. So here I get a warning telling me that it doesn't know about radius because you don't need the radius. And also you can see that it doesn't match the grid. That's just because the special layer has a cell size of 0.75. So I will just divide by 0.75 here just to get a better visual match. And yeah, so here you can see that it matches the cells. And so yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just get a direct access to the cell, and it improves the performance. If your effect can live with that, with the direct access, it improves the performance because it doesn't have to find the cells that intersect the sphere of the query and all that additional things that the regular queries do. Yeah.
So new optimized way to communicate between particles.
Yeah. There were cases where you would abuse the special layers by feeding a fabricated position where like the x coordinates would be your particle ID, for example, and you'd put 0 in the rest. Well, here you can just use a direct access with the particle ID without having to take care about querying the center of the cell with a radius small enough so that it doesn't go touch the neighboring cells and all that kind of things. So for those kinds of effects, it's way better. And you can also now insert into a specific cell. This one is a bit more hidden, and we might make it more explicit in a later version, but you can do that by piping in an int3 instead of a float3. So yeah. Next things, since 2.14, we fixed a long-standing problem where the shader cache of the editor wasn't automatically cleared when you changed versions, and the editor couldn't detect that the shaders had changed, so it didn't automatically rebuild them. So if you did not clear your shader cache manually, you would have like rendering glitches and artifacts. So on each release page, we wrote at the very top, when switching to version, let's say 2.11 from 2.10, clear your shader cache, otherwise you'll have issues. So yeah, this is finally fixed. When you upgrade the project to 2.14 and open it with the 2.14 editor, your shader cache will be cleared and rebuilt. And also in the runtime improvements, another very long-standing to-do that we implemented in 2.14 is what we call the data nodes in the layer graph. So I will show you an actual example because the name might not be very explicit. So this was mainly if you were doing templates inside the layer graph, so layer templates. So here I have a bunch of multiplier nodes, and here I have a custom template inside this effect, which I named noise multiplier. So when you open it, it's just a regular multiplier node, except in the spawn count. Here we piped a self.age at evolve, piped into a noise and remapped between 1 and 20 particles per second. So it's this column here, and you see that the spawn rate basically varies depending on the noise. And if I change the scale of the noise, you will see it varying slower or faster, being more random, etc. So the problem before 2.14 was that if you wanted to expose anything to the parent graph that would control these data nodes, because those are not event nodes you would have normally in the layer graph, those types of nodes usually live inside a layer. So if you wanted to expose anything to the parent graph, for example, this max spawn count, so if I wanted to do an input node and max spawn count and expose that, so that I would be able here to control it either in the property grid or pipe something else, it would always expand to 0. So this is now fixed, and you can expose properties here to the parent graphs. One small note in the 2.14.0, there is currently a bug which will require you, when you change that value, that exposed value. So let's say I say 10. Here I changed it, but nothing changes. You have to hit that small recompile button, which is only visible if you enable developer mode in the settings. So general developer mode. This is a bug that we will fix hopefully in patch 1. But if you close the effect, reopen it, or if you change the final layer, it will recompile the entire thing, and you will see the value refreshing. So yeah, here I can just put 100 with this. So it seems like a basic feature that should be here since the beginning, but it was not, and it wasn't explicit at all, and we've had multiple bug tickets from multiple people in different productions telling us that this wasn't working. So at last it's working.
Just to mention that the exec rate is not correct in the layer graph.
Oh yeah,
maybe because
it's not
weird.
displayed. Yeah. If this was in the layer, this should be red, this should be red, this should be red. But here in the layer graph, only the nodes that have an explicit exec rate are displayed as their exec rate. And you also don't have the timings in there. Yeah, this is something that's simply not implemented for the time being. Hopefully we'll tackle it in 2.15 or on that later. So now I think it will be your turn, Ralph.
So now I'm going to show you a few features, a few editor features that are in the node graph that are mainly here to improve the artist workflow. So mostly everyday manipulations that will hopefully save you some time. The first and most important one is the new swizzle node. So it can be a swizzle node, a shuffle node, like it doesn't, you may have a different name for it. But basically, this is what it does. I'll stop this effect for now. So basically, if you have any kind of float, it may be a float 1, float 2, float 3, or 4, or even a color, you can now drag your float and type dot, then followed by x, y, z, 0 or 1, whatever you want. So if I type dot xx z, for instance, I had 1, 2, 3 as values, and now I have 1, 1, 3, because you can see here that it took my float 3 x, y, z coordinates and made a new float 3 with the x, z coordinates. So you can do that either by dragging and typing whatever you want after the dot, or either by creating a new shuffle node, swizzle node, sorry, that's the name. So
but if you type shuffle, you will also find it. You can type swizzle, shuffle, permute, it will find it.
So yeah, you can. I showed a few examples here. You can have you can keep the same length. So I have a float 3 that I turn into another float 3, but with new values. You can have you can turn it into a float 4, another float 3, but with a 0 inserted here, into a float 1, or basically whatever you want. You can do this with a float 1. Float 1 that you can turn into a float 2, float 3, whatever. Same with float 2. Here I have float 1 and here a float 3. And you can also do that with colors, so which are basically float 4s. And either by following the previous way of spelling. So you can, here I typed YYZW, and it basically just switched the X value for the Y value. But you can also use the color semantic. So here I use the RGB. So I'll show you. If I type RRB, for instance, it still works and considers the R as X, G as Y, and B as Z, and it works with the A value. So you can consider your alpha as the W value, and so no matter what you type in, it will understand what you want to do. So this is a great way of what we hope of improving your workflow and making changes on float faster than having to deconstruct the float and I guess splitting it and constructing again. So this is this may help you work way faster with floats 2, 3, 4s. Another small new feature here is the new color lerp node. So we have this new node here that is a color lerp, and it allows you to lerp between colors in a new way that you used to. So before that, if you did the basic lerp, linear interpolation between two colors, here between cyan and red, it used to go through the middle of the color disk, and you used to have those kind of gray value here in the middle that you might not want. You still had the possibility to do otherwise, but now it's already made for you. So you have this color lerp that lerps on the hue values instead of going through the disk, and it allows you to shift through color values without having those desaturated grays that you might not want. And finally, we have a few we made a few improvements to the timer node. So you already had a timer in PopcornFX, and this is just the upgraded version of it. So it now features more pins than it used to. So we now have the pause, stop, restart, reset pins that can be really helpful. So here it is. So you have a start pin as on every stopwatch, but you can also use the pause button. You can have a stop button to reset it and stop it. You can, if I start it again, you can have the reset button, so which restarts it and keeps the previous value it had. So now it's running. So if I hit reset, it goes back to 0 and continues running. But if I hit pause, then reset, it just keeps the value it has and doesn't. It just goes back to 0, but keeps the state it had, so it doesn't run again. And if I now have it start, then pause it, but then press the restart button, it restarts and starts counting again. So basically, by combining all those, it works the same as before, but it's way easier to use them, and you can just plug things in and it works automatically, without having to make complex setups. Here, for instance, I just had to plug the collision check into the restart node. You can see that it counts automatically the time elapsed between since the last collision. And here I just changed the red value of the particle. But you can do many things just by plugging some pins into these reset, restart, and stop nodes pins. Sorry. So it will be way easier now to work with the timers.
So here, yeah, the more red the particle is, the more time was elapsed since the last collision.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And now it's counted almost automatically. Here, you just have one pin to do that before. And finally, is it here? There's something. Yeah. So the last thing I want to show you are the new packages that we released on the store. So here they are. Just like before, you can still access those packages from the marketplace. They are all the free packages that used to be here, but we have some new ones here. Some of this FPS starter pack has been revamped. It was already here, but it's now has now evolved. And there are those new packs, the alien weapons and the space soldier weapons, as well as the FPS starter packs. Those three are available if you have an indie license or above. And those two impact and muzzle flash packs are just sample packs that you can use. So all of for free, even if you don't. Just like those two ones, bullet impact and frag grenade. So all those 4 packs are free to use, no matter your license level. And yeah, so those packs can be found here in the marketplace, and there are all effects that are ready to use in your project. So I will show you what they look like. So we have the alien weapon here, so you can have a quick view of those. Let's show you a few of those. So as with all of our packs, you can have access to, you have the node graph and you have everything here. You have a few properties exposed that either the easy ones or more complex ones if you want to change how bright things are, how wide things are. So you have all those parameters that will be accessible in your engine. And so yeah, you have a few various effects, just like laser impacts, for instance. You have another pack that is space themed, which is the space soldier guns. So here you have these sparks with many things you can change as usual.
All these also have a global scale attribute that you can use to change the scale in engine.
Yeah, this will be accessible directly in engine. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that one, so the distance did not change when changing the global scale, just because it's a different attribute for the coordinate of the target. Yeah. And I think if you select the entire attribute and hit the W in the viewport, I think you can have a gizmo. Yeah, you have the gizmo to move the target. Yeah.
So let me show you a few more. You can have alien weapon impacts.
Oh, that one. Can you zoom in a bit?
Some muzzle flashes too. And finally the FPS one, which is a one that was there before, but has now been a bit upgraded. So you have many environment effects, such as explosions.
Well, maybe you can show the rotate of the cube map.
Oh yeah, here we can show the cube map.
And, show if it changes the lighting maybe of the smoke.
You have few impacts as well. And you can basically before you get it back, you can click on it and see everything that is inside. So you can see all the textures, all the effects that we use there. And you can also have access here to the ArtStation page, which will show you the effect in its in engine, so in a real environment, so to give you an idea of how it could look. Should I click on that maybe?
Yeah, maybe you can show the ArtStation page. Oh, it's open on the
just have to
bring
it here.
drag
Okay.
and drop it.
So here
you should close some of the effect editors.
Oh yeah,
okay.
You minimize the whole bunch of them, so They're
yeah.
still running.
Okay, sorry.
I think the crowd effect is pretty
Oh yeah, sorry.
might be pretty heavy, and would have been a good idea to close it, not let it run in the background.
So here you can have a few samples of how these effects will look like in engine. So with, of course, many attributes that you can change as you like.
Yeah, so this is in Unreal, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
these are in Unreal Engine. Oh, sorry,
Nope.
not the right one. Okay. Here you have the other one, the Alien Weapons pack. So all those effects are ready to use. You just have to plug them in the engine.
Very cool.
And finally, the FPS pack. So this is the kind of things you could do with those effects.
Well,
And yeah,
thank you.
those effects here that Raf showed you, those three packs, they are, each of them are basically one effect from the full package that he showed you. So you get this effect if you get that package, and same for this one, and same for the two FPS ones here.
Just to avoid downloading the whole pack when you just want the effect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure, maybe there are questions on the... I think that's it regarding the v2.14
Yep.
presentation. Maybe you want to talk about the next step?
Yep, this.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So after 2.14 will be our next LTS. So the previous LTS was 2.9. We went up to 2.9.23, I believe, or 22. With 22 patches on 2.9, and kept supporting it till a few months ago, where there aren't really any major fixes to do anymore. So now 2.15 will be the next one. Like 2.9, we will keep supporting it for as long as there are bug fixes. And this will be mainly editor UX and UI focused version, where we want to basically flush all the little tickets, little UI and UX tickets that we have accumulated for the past 3 years, and that were never prioritized because there was always something more important to do. So yeah, this will be a big UX version. Lots of small improvements here and there in the editor, quality of life improvements, and things that should make your life easier as a VFX artist using Popcorn. Right, so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And yeah, we keep our roughly 3 months development cycle. So this one will arrive in January 2023.
I'm not sure if there are questions on the chat.
Check. Maybe on the, yep. Where is it?
Okay.
Yes, Romeo, finally, data nodes in layer graph. It happened.
Okay. So if there are no questions, maybe we can end this here.
Yep. And if you have questions later on, as always, we're on Discord, so don't hesitate to pop in and ask us anything, or report us any issues you might have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.